Hello friends and welcome to episode 98 of the Noclip podcast. We're trucking along. We're almost at episode 100 and I'm just going to say it right at the top of the show. Open up your email browser, email account. Open up your email service right now and send us podcast@noclip.video. Send us a game, any game name, a favorite game, a game you hate, a game you love, a game no one else will ever know about, a game that you know about that is so obscure. Just send this to us, because for episode 100 of this podcast, we are going to be taking 100 games sent to us from the listeners of this podcast, and we are going to rank them, all 100, a random list. Jesse's going to be on the show. We're going to do it. It'll probably take hours and hours, but we will do it to celebrate our 100th episode of the Noclip podcast. So podcast@noclip.video. Just send. It can be in the subject title. Just send us the name. We're going to keep asking until we get them. 100 games, and you can listen to our beautiful 100 episode podcast. It might actually be, is a Thanksgiving week that'll be a will. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. And we'll talk about all of those. Jeremy Jane, if you had one game to put on that list, let's do it. Let's just do it right now. Let's all three of us add a game to that list. Jeremy Jane, on the spot, what's going on our list?
Spike McFang. It is a Super Nintendo game.
Christ, why did I ask?
You play as a adorable vampire who
is he Irish?
I don't know. That's a good question. He goes around, he spins around, he kills garlic, I think, and eats tomatoes, something like that. It's a good game.
Spike McFang. Okay, it's on the list. Frank Howley, what is your game you're going to add?
X-Men versus Street Fighter.
Okay. bit more well known.
Yeah.
Okay, versus Street Fighter. And I will add as my game, let's go with, I'm going to turn around the first game I see when I turn around. Soccer Kid.
Ooh, wow.
Okay, wait, I want to revise mine to something because it'll make better discussion. Let's do Wolfenstein Enemy Territory instead of Spike McFang.
Okay, that's also going in there. You also get Wolfenstein.
Okay.
Because I want to get, because Spike McFang, I want to get that in as well, because that's Enemy Territory. Okay, here we go. As a slight sort of like warm up to the main event.
Yeah.
Are we going to rank these four?
Let's try and rank these four games. Okay. So we have Spike McFang, a game two of us don't know about. Wolfenstein Enemy Territory from Splash Damage, I believe. X-Men vs. Street Fighter, classic fighting game, and Soccer Kid, relatively obscure Amiga and I believe NES, Super NES platform game starring a kid with a soccer ball. Okay, which one of these do we think is the worst, and is it Spike McFang?
Spike McFang is either 3 or 4, for sure.
Okay.
Whether it's 3 or 4, I cannot say because I am not familiar enough with Soccer Kid.
Yeah. You have to defend Soccer Kid. I don't know anything.
Yeah, make a
about
case.
Okay, Soccer Kid is a 2D gay. It's a beautiful looking 2D side-scrolling platform game where I think aliens take the World Cup up into space and it explodes and falls in different parts of the world.
Right.
And then like some of the levels are in London and England because one of the parts landed in England, one part landed in Italy, one part landed in Japan, and you're a kid whose only method of defense and movement is a soccer ball. So you can kick the soccer ball at enemies. You can use it to like do tricks and stuff. You can use it to jump on it to get high places. It's pretty good. I don't know if it's better than X-Men vs. Street Fighter or Wolfenstein, but it's probably better than Spike McFang.
Okay, that's probably 3 then. Okay. And then Spike McFang is... I want to come out in defense of Spike McFang, but I also want to say that my love of it is probably 97% nostalgia.
Okay. It kind of looks like a Final Fantasy, like a top-down...
Yeah.
Or a Zelda,
Zelda.
Cute.
It's actually really good. It's a Super Nintendo era kind of action JRPG, little Link to the Past-y, but it doesn't quite feel as good. It's a little shorter, kind of falls apart in the third act a little bit, but it's pretty good. I feel like that and Soccer Kid, it's a toss-up on what's 3 and 4.
And that's the problem we're going to run into. We're going to have whole 10 game blocks of toss-ups, I think, in this thing. Okay, so which is better then? It's X-Men versus Street Fighter and Wolfenstein Enemy Territory.
I don't think you can deny Wolfenstein's like value and importance in video game history. I think as like the first 3D first-person shooter, is that or is Wolfenstein Enemy Territory the later one?
Enemy Territory is the splash damage multiplayer one. From the mid 2000s.
Early
mid 2000s. I remember I have
I
have a disturbing memory that I'll share of Wolfenstein Enemy Territory.
Please do. Is this where you found your love of Nazism?
And then I just thought, I mean, if the costumes are that cool. So the year that this game came out, I believe it came out in the summer. I was playing a lot of it one summer, and I was playing out in the yard, and I stepped on a splinter and got a splinter in my foot. And obviously had to remove it, but it could not. If you're squeamish, skip ahead 60 seconds. It could not be removed with mere tweezers, and so a knife had to be used.
Oh no!
And so I didn't want to do it, and I was playing Wolfenstein Enemy Territory, and my dad was like, "I'll just do it. You just like play your game, and I'll just do it." So I have a very disturbing memory of my dad cutting a piece of wood out of my foot with a knife while I played Wolfenstein Enemy Territory, and that is why it's the number one game of the top 4.
It's a good. Okay, how much have you bled for X-Men versus Street Fighter, Frank?
Well, I think like X-Men versus Street Fighter is amazing because it was the first of the Marvel versus Capcom games because they were developing that engine with like Street Fighter Alpha and then X-Men Children of the Atom, but like playing Street Fighter versus X-Men in the arcade, oh my gosh, because you could Marvel vs. Capcom 2 is greater, but that's the OG. I love that game. I like X-Men. I like Street Fighter. Now, I will say Wolfenstein Enemy Territory is free to play on Steam, so it's way more accessible. X-Men vs. Street Fighter, you need to get some MAME emulation. It's still doable, but Enemy Territory you can play right now. But I don't think there's a giant arcade cabinet dedicated to Wolfenstein Enemy Territory. True. It also does not have Wolverine or Magneto. Or
is any Nazis in X-Men versus Street Fighter? Well, actually, I think there is. Isn't Magneto?
Well, Magneto was a survivor, and now
he's the opposite of a Nazi.
Yeah.
He's a Holocaust survivor.
Apologies to all.
No, he wants to eradicate. Doesn't he want to eradicate all non-mutants? I don't know. Isn't that his kind of MO?
There is that scene where Michael Fassbender shoots a bunch of Nazis in Brazil, I think, and I got confused and accidentally called Michael Fassbender.
Magneto. Okay, so Magneto is one of those people who, spurned by fascism, turns to fascism.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Like a certain. I'm not going to make this joke. I'm not going to make a geopolitics joke about which country that reminds me of. But let's move on from that.
Yeah,
Spin
but then
the
you also have Guile on the other side, who I think is close to a U.S. ally soldier. You know, like it does represent. It would be tied in Wolfenstein. I could see Guile if he traveled back in time, flying planes over Germany.
Wolfenstein had Punkbuster, so that either goes in the plus or minus column. What do we think? We got to make a hard call. Everyone vote. Which one's better?
I'm voting X-Men vs. Street Fighter.
Okay.
I'm voting WET because it has a good acronym.
WET. Oh, it goes tiebreaker Danny.
I really didn't want it to be me because I don't really know enough about X-Men versus Street Fighter. I know it's pretty good. Let's just say Wolfenstein, and we can come back to it. We'll come back to it in the podcast. If you want to listen to more of that goodness and have your game as part of that list, podcast@noclip.video. Send it over and we will get it on the list. There are now 96 slots remaining. Okay, let's talk about some new games that don't involve cute little vampires. At least I don't think so, but who knows? The world of God of War is very confusing. So is the world of Sonic Frontiers. We're also going to talk a little bit about Zaum, the latest statement coming out of that. We might talk about the Mick Gordon stuff that dropped this morning. But before we do any of that, massive thanks to all of our incredible Battle Pass holders: Jason Drury, Cody Krieger, Sven Huster, Forrest Pruitt, Andy Fagan, Andy Fagan, Cameron Ladd, George Sakotis, Jacob Godserve, and Tohir Tilyaev. If you'd like to support this podcast, patreon.com/noclip. Last thing I want to mention on housekeeping, Extra Life 2022. I'm going to be streaming this Friday. I don't know exactly what time. I think after work for, who knows, 12 hours, 24 hours. I'm not quite sure. But follow Noclip on Twitch, twitch.tv/Noclip. I'm doing this as part of the Giant Bomb Extra Life effort, which we've joined in on for the past few years. And yeah, you can head over to tinyurl.com/Noclip Extra Life if you'd like to donate to that. We'll have a lot of fun. Even if you can't donate, come on down. I'm going to be doing one thing actually where I will dollar match every wish list we get on Stunt Derby for the duration of the stream. So it's kind of a scary proposition, because if we get like 5,000 wish lists, I mean, it'll help. It'll help if we go to a publisher, but also hey, it's a charity, I guess. All of this funds, of course, going to UCSF Bettyhoff in Oakland, which we have supported on Noclip for many a year at this stage. I think maybe 6 years. Okay, video games. Let's talk about them. God of War is on the tip of everyone's tongue, so let's talk about Sonic Frontiers. Frank.
Oh, yeah.
What is the Sonic game all about? Is it a good Sonic game? Is it Breath of the Wild with a blue hedgehog? Is it trash like so many Sonic games? Where did this one land?
I feel like the bar is so low for a new Sonic game to be good that it flies above. This is a good Sonic game. It kind of feels like Sonic, what you would imagine Sonic Adventure 3 meets Breath of the Wild. It's real. The form of the game is very bizarre, and I've spent maybe 4 hours playing it. I beat the first island and now in the second world. So the premise is Sonic is flying on a plane with Tails and Amy, and then it gets sucked into an island. All of Sonic's friends get sucked into cyberspace, and Sonic awakens on this island that is controlled by these Titans, which look like monsters straight out of Evangelion. And you can go into cyberspace, and inside cyberspace are traditional like Sonic adventure levels, where it's like linear, you're going fast. There's like you're collecting stuff, speedrunning. When you're outside of cyberspace in the I don't know, post-apocalyptic world, it's very desaturated, but it's a giant open world collectible game, kind of like Super Mario Odyssey or Breath of the Wild. There's like 4 different games in here. Also, because all your friends are in cyberspace, Sonic is traveling and meeting all of his friends, and they show up as holograms. And it's like, Sonic, you have to collect my hearts for me. And so it feels like this game is cribbing Death Stranding, Breath of the Wild, Mario Odyssey, Sonic Adventure. But also like there's weird elements of like the movement is really good, so I feel like I'm playing like Tony Hawk or something. It actually feels really good to move, and that's the biggest crutch for a Sonic game, is that if the movement isn't fast or fun, so like it's a little janky, but it's fun. And you're constantly leveling up. You can level up your speed, your attack, your defense. So like there's skill trees. You unlock different moves. So it's like there's like Assassin's Creed ass shit in it too. Like I don't know. There's so much. It just felt like Sega. I don't know who Sonic team was like. All right, what they pulled their head out of their little hedgehog hole and it's like, all right, what's going on in gaming right now? And they just made a giant buffet. And so like. It's like the strongest 7 out of 10 game ever. It's like yeah, I like this. This is weird. Like, but I chill out with it. Like, I couldn't stop playing it. Like, it's really, really, it's so weird. So again, if you're a Sonic fan, check this out. If you're not a Sonic fan, like you know, Death Stranding is better, Breath of the Wild's better, Mario Odyssey's better. But it's so weird. It's such a weird game, and all the cutscenes, like Sonic has a weirdly deep voice. It's just I don't know. Amy, you're trapped in cyberspace. Is it Chris Pratt?
Is it?
I don't know who does the voice. So the other weird thing that's weird is when you're in cyberspace, the game is so colorful and beautiful, and it kind of makes me angry that like the rest of the game isn't that. Like why is it so dreary and melancholy in the open world stuff? But there's different levels. The first level, the first world, the map you explore is like a desaturated island. It's a just I don't know, like a Death Stranding.
It looks like
valley.
Ico or something.
Yeah. And you are scaling monsters like Shadow of the Colossus. Again, it's such a weird game.
It's such a mishmash of game genres. It's so strange.
But the second world you go to is like desert. But then it's like, it's like in Mario Odyssey, there's the desert world. So I can't wait to see what the other levels are like. It's such a weird game.
The next one's way better. Casino.
Right? That's what I'm hoping for. And I feel like this exceeded expectations because I had a friend who was at Summer Games Fest, and apparently they were very tight with their demo kiosk. They didn't want people taking pictures of it, photos. My friend got rejected too. There was no one waiting to play the game, and my friend was like, "Hey, can I play this?" "Oh, no, sir, you don't have an appointment."
I couldn't get. Yeah, there was appointment only, but it was on the show floor because they just didn't have a place for people not to do it because of COVID.
Now that's making me rethink saying like, if you're not a Sonic fan, don't play this. Like, it seems like Sega was gatekeeping this game, like it's only meant for Sonic fans. I'm saying dive in. It's I don't know. Sonic games are so goofy because they are. You know, I always describe these types of games as like Dreamcast games, where it's just so silly and weird and something you wouldn't play more than like 2 hours at a time or max. I don't know, but it's like this is such a goofy video game. But the movement is nice. You do level up your speed, and then Yeah, Big the Cat is in it, and there's fishing, and the fishing minigame is actually really nice and fun. A lot of fishing minigames can be stressful. This is very almost like Animal Crossing, like or Cult to the Lamb. It's very easy, and by fishing, you can then level up your other stats. So, man, it's such a goofy ass game.
God,
I want to
play it now. You just I'm watching the trailer as well as you're explaining it, and it does just seem like it looks like somebody did a Sonic game jam, but like the most the most expensive game jam ever, where they then went and made all the games.
I've been streaming it a ton, and like every hour someone will come in the chat and be like, is this a fan-made game or is this real?
Yeah.
Like, it looks like it was made in dreams. It looks like an Unreal demo. It is real, but it's such a weird video game. Like, it feels like a fake video game.
I was so curious because the reviews were like spanning the entire spectrum from 2 to maybe not to 10, but 8 or 9. And
SonicWorld.com didn't give it a 10.
They had to, though. There was a gun to their head. So, Frank, I watched you stream a little bit of it. And,
wow, yeah.
It was so funny because it would go from like, oh, yeah, wow, this is like a competent kind of like open world, Nintendo-y adjacent kind of looking game. And then at one point you leveled up your skills and got a zigzag attack. And as soon as you started spamming it, Sonic was just like flying through the air. Like it looked like someone had downloaded a rig and model for Mixamo and had no idea what they were doing in Blender and just was throwing it around as a physics object. It was it's not that this game is a 2 to some people and a 10 to some people. I think at moments it's a 2 and at moments it's a 10.
Yes.
I was looking at the footage of this game and something struck me that if you woke up from a coma, right? This game is seems indistinguishable. Your reaction to this would be indistinguishable from somebody 2 years ago who picked up Balan Wonderworld for the first time.
Yes.
Like, these games are just like, if you don't know the context for what this franchise is, and you're just looking at what's going on, it's like there's a blue hedgehog who's flying through rings, and like like you said, like this sort of weirdly photorealistic rendition of Iceland or something. Yeah. It makes you'd be like, who is this for? Like, who are these games for? And it's just because they're weighed down by this massively broad palette of expectation from 40 years of people playing Sonic games. And this is what you end up with. And it sounds like they did a decent job. They mightn't have stuck the landing, but they didn't break their ankles.
Yeah, it really feels like they were doing a group project and copied everyone else's homework. And it's like, oh, that's a good idea. One of my favorite details is Breath of the Wild has, I think they're called Kuroks, and you collect the little Kuroks and bring them to the Elder Kurok, or you collect the seeds. In this game, you collect Kokos, and you deliver them to the Elder Kokos. And it's like they inverted the design, like in Photoshop, just did invert colors. Like, it's the same design. It's just like, it's so blatant that it's like, you can't hate it. It's like, I don't know, it's just so funny to me. It's like, yeah, I love it. It's ridiculous.
It's like when the war in Ukraine heated up and McDonald's pulled out of Russia, but Russia kept running all the McDonald's.
Yes.
But they were not as good. But they were like, oh, it's a Dick Monald's, and they had the Big Mac by a different name, but it was shitty.
It feels like, I feel like in kids movies, like there's a movie called Max Keeble's Big Move or Doug's first movie. This feels like it's Sonic's first next gen game, or like it's that. It's like Sonic's first open world video game, and it's like, yep, Sonic's here too. I have collectibles.
Oh my God, dude.
I have holographic friends. It's
Sonic Frontiers, available now. What's it on? Is it on PC? Is it just...
I think it's on everything. I'm playing it on Xbox. Oh, if you sign up for the Sega newsletter, you get Sonic Adventure 2 Soap Shoe DLC. So you get the Sonic Adventure 2 shoes. Soap shoes, so
you can grind on stuff?
Yeah.
Love it.
Because Sonic Adventure 2 had the official soap shoe collaboration.
Oh, it did. You're right. God, I forgot. Yep. Jeez Louise. That's right down your alley. Yeah, it's available on Switch, PS5, PS4, Xbox One, Series X, S, and Windows. I'm gonna see if that's Steam Deck compatible and see if
hell yeah.
Although is it $60? Like I think I might maybe I'll
60,
wait.
Not 70. And then I will say the first hour is I don't get this at all. And then once I kind of understood, I'm like, okay. And then it does the the Elder Scrolls thing where it's it always has on the top of the map your next main story waypoint. So if you get numb collecting stuff, it's okay, I can go here. And it's half the time it's talk to Amy. So it's I don't know. It's like Sonic always has to check in with his girlfriend and,
Yeah.
and impress her.
She's
I
the
don't know, I
human
like
one,
it.
is she, or is she the white one?
No, so she is the girl hedgehog with the pink one. There is like a little weird chibi girl. Eggman is stuck in cyberspace. It's just ridiculous. It's
Awesome.
ridiculous.
Can I tell you a hedgehog story?
Yes.
Yeah.
This is the story my mom told me from her childhood, so maybe it may not be exactly accurate to reality, but it's like most of it is accurate to reality. My mom was walking to when she was a kid. She was quite young, like maybe an early teenager, or maybe even younger, maybe just like a tween. These were like the olden times in Dublin, and she was walking to go to the cinema with some friends, and she came across a hedgehog, and she brought the hedgehog to the cinema, and she watched the movie with the hedgehog, and she brought the hedgehog home. And then they had a hedgehog in their like garden, and they'd go out and feed the hedgehog and whatever. And then after like a week or two, the hedgehog like dies, right? So they're like, oh, that's sad. And they bury the hedgehog in the back garden. And then like winter passes, or a couple of weeks pass, and they go out in the back garden, and there's like a hole where the hedgehog was. And my granddad apparently figured out, and I'm not sure if this is entirely true. I was like, oh, when I heard the story, I was like, oh, did like a predator come and dig up this hedgehog? And they were like, no, the hedgehog dug itself out. Like this thing was like hibernating or something, and they buried it alive, and then it woke up underground and was like, what the fuck? And then dug itself out.
Holy shit.
So
That's awesome.
if you're an expert on hedgehogs and you can validate this story, please let me know. But yeah, my mom told me a weird story of this one time, and I was like, that's a really fucked up story about how you buried a hedgehog alive.
That's wild. They should have put like a little string with a bell on it, like they used to with
You're right.
graves, in case people woke up.
Exactly, yeah. But then those bells would ring all the time because of
That's
like
so true. A gentle
wind
gust
and
comes
shit.
through,
Yeah.
and you're like, "Holy shit, Uncle Jeffrey is still out there."
Bit of gas pops up in the rigor, in the fetid body, and suddenly everyone's like, "Wait, did that ring? Did that ring? I thought I
Should
heard
we
a
dig him
ring."
up just in case? I mean, we got to dig him up, right? Just to make sure he's dead.
Whole graveyard full of fucking bells, and like one of them rings, and they're like, "Which one of you is alive?"
Every graveyard the world over is just full of people digging up their relatives just to make
Just
sure.
in case. Got to exhume. Always got to exhume first, ask questions later. God of War Ragnarok is out. Sony Santa Monica's sophomore album of the latest dad adventures of Kratos and his son who keeps growing. It's out now. You can play it on the PlayStation 5 or the PlayStation 4. Many of you are. It has got 94% on Metacritic. Everyone loves the God of War. All the mischievous adventures of Kratos. What's going to happen next? We're all asking the same questions, and I'm here to answer at least the first 3 hours of them, because that's how much I played last night. Gentlemen, do you have much experience with the GOW?
I've played all of them up to this new one. Like even the PSP mini games, they're awesome. Yeah, God of War 2018 was really cool. I played that even like a few months or even a year after it had come out. Oh my god, it's awesome. Yeah.
Lovely.
But I haven't touched this new one at all.
I played God of War 1 and 2 back in the day. I played a little bit of 2018. I kind of bounced off it. One of those games that I recognized was a very high quality game that was maybe just not for my sensibilities. But yeah, I'm curious if Ragnarok maybe would, because like I'm one of those people who, if I know I'm not going to play a game, I am so interested in storycraft that I wanted to just like look up the story and see what they did with it, because I thought it was interesting. So I know what happens in 2018.
Oh, cool.
Maybe I could just pick up. Also, I know there's like a recap button on the menu.
Yeah,
of Ragnarok.
there is. I think I fall into a similar camp to you, Jeremy. I played it when it first came out, and I played maybe a quarter of it and sort of like, cool, yeah, like this isn't really my genre. I like the story and the direction and the production a lot. The action is kind of like not my thing, I fail this way. Like a lot of these games, I end up playing more for the story and for the worlds. Like The Last of Us is another one where I do like the moment-to-moment action in those games more than I do a hack-and-slash game like God of War, but definitely the thing that pulls me along is the world building and like the characters and stuff like that. It's kind of why I'm there. There's lots of games like that. I've even replayed Portal 2 recently, and I was like, oh, I like the puzzles in this game. They're well made, but like the thing that actually is like getting me here is the story and like how it gets resolved. So I ended up like going back to 2018 and then playing it again. And I thought I hadn't played that much, but when I pressed the recap button on the menu on this, I knew 80% of what happened. I remembered. So I was like, oh, I actually got pretty close to the ending. I didn't remember the like final story stuff that like kind of gets revealed, and we won't talk about them here. So I was like, oh cool, that's how they ended it. That's neat. And then Ragnarok takes that ball and immediately runs with it. Set a couple of years in the future, so the little boy is Atreus. Is that his name, Atreus? I think maybe it's another Greek name. He's a little bit older. Kratos is a little bit older too, a little bit beardier, still as gruff. It's set in a sort of in a winter time that's kind of come in due to the events of the first game, and it is one of those games. I will say though, I could not put it down. I don't know what it was. I think the pacing of the opening act of this game is super strong. It doesn't make you sit around and wait a lot. You're kind of always moving, even if there's like story stuff happening. I'm kind of like, or if there's like action scenes that are not overly long. I've toyed with the whole do the story version of it, because this, I think there's at least 5 difficulty settings in this one, and they're all based on how much story and how much action, right? The like super hard God of War mode, and then the story mode, and then everything in between. And I went for the middle one because I always like to. I did the same with what's the name of that? Chris Pratt again. His
Guardians of the Galaxy.
Guardians Galaxy. Thank you. The Guardians of the Galaxy game. I did the same thing where I was like, I'll go with the middle one just to give it a go and play the game on its terms, and then I'll ratchet it back if I'm finding it annoying. And I haven't. I've actually been enjoying the combat. I've had a bunch of boss fights. They've all been very interesting and engaging. It feels like a team who's made their second game and they came off the first one, and I don't think it's a massive departure in terms of like how it's produced and shot and how the action, the moment to moment, what you're doing and all that stuff, but it just feels tighter, like, and just better made and maybe better paced and all that sort of stuff. I'm definitely in the camp of whenever like the game comes up and says upgrade your bot, I'm just fuck off. I don't care. Like whenever it does anything like you've got new, skill points, or like, in open world games, I'm totally okay with that, because like I'm trying to like create my version of the character and explore the world I want. But in linear games, I've never cared about upgrading the axe. I'm just like, give me the axe, or just like have the axe upgrade itself. I don't care. Like I'm sure,
or have it be diegetic. Like have it be in world. You meet a character who's a blacksmith, and they're part of.
So they do that in this.
Do they?
Yeah, and also like not with everything, obviously, with like the skill points they don't, but like for the blacksmiths they do. And also like at one stage I lost a piece of equipment because of something that happened in the story, and then I had to go to one of those guys, the 2 little dwarf dudes, to like get a new ththing done. So you're right. Cool. Like that is a way in which they solve for that problem with that clever solution. But I like there's layers of this that are like I don't even care about the top layer, and it goes like so many layers into upgrading it. And they need to do it, I guess, because they need to have you collecting stuff and thinking about, they need incentives for you to go get the chests so that you get the raw materials. So then you do. So I understand like if you strip that stuff out, the game would probably feel lesser for it. But I think I'm impatient when I play these games. There's like some games where you just want to see what happens next, and you're impatient for it. Some TV shows I'm like that too, or you're like watching Game of Thrones and you're like, get on with it. Which I like, which is why I like the new series, because they do just kind of get on with it. So I think this is faster paced than the other game. Obviously, it's a known quantity now. They don't have to do a lot of the like setting the foundations of the world and the characters and all that, so you kind of know who these lads are. And I like their dynamic a lot. Like it's still the whole dad son thing, but like Atreus is so much more of a big young adult who's smart and is able to like question Kratos, and I think the dynamic is way more interesting as a result. So I'm loving all their back and forth. It's pretty cool.
Awesome.
One question I have, because it's been years since I played the God of War reboot. Isn't the whole like combat flow? Doesn't Atreus like finish off your enemies, or doesn't he do ranged attack with like the bows and stuff? Is that still a dynamic in the game? Like, because it's been so long, but I remember loving the combat in these. Yeah,
you've got like you can direct him to do stuff, or he'll just kind of take care of himself as well. You don't have to get him to do a lot of things. And you have like, I'm going to be so like detail agnostic here or whatever, or vague.
Sure.
You have like multiple weapons that each of them sort of have their own version of a ranged thing and a melee thing. There's also elemental damage associated with it that changes. and the worlds that you inhabit, because obviously there's a lot of like jumping between different dimensions, well, not dimensions, whatever you call them, like parts of Norse lore, and some of them are, you know, different to others and have different types of enemies in them. So there's a lot of like sort of, you know, moment to moment in the combat, you're trying to solve those puzzles, and some of the elemental puzzles that they bring up are really cool. Like there are like these types of enemies that like, oh, they actually turn into this version of themselves then, and now your old weapons don't work. You have to use these ones. So you're constantly thinking about it. And the same with the boss fights. I've had like, there's a lot of boss fights. I've had like 3 boss fights in the first 3 hours, which actually doesn't include a sort of cinematic boss fight at the start, which I guess I wouldn't include. So there's a lot of that too. Yeah.
Cool. Sounds like a good game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like eager to ask. I'm eager to ask, like, oh, who are you fighting? But it's like, no, I think I just gotta dive in and play it.
It's got the whole. Yeah. They introduce a whole cast of Norse motherfuckers right off. They're deep in their lore pretty early on, and you get to sort of meet the pantheon, and the dialogue is just great. Like some of the direction stuff is very interesting. I always find it interesting, the choices they make. It's a lot of like Steadicam one shot stuff, you know, which they all like filmed in like in a you know, motion capture thing.
I forgot that was like the major thing with that original game, is it's all supposed to be like one unbroken like cinematic experience. Are they still doing the same?
As far as I know, yeah. There's no cuts. Yeah, it's all which
cool.
Oh my God,
which is cool because it gives you a real sense of place. I think there's some times where I'm like very aware of the camera work, which obviously is maybe not ideal. Yeah. Also, maybe it's just because we're camera people and that comes with the territory. But there's a couple of shots I was like, you sure you want to take this from this side? Someone else is talking. You might want to like get a little bit of coverage here, but
maybe just one cut.
Yeah, maybe just one cut. I really want to see.
It's like Hitchcock's Rope, where it's like you're like, all right, the camera just moved through a table. I'll allow you one cut here because it doesn't make any sense that this is happening.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I was gonna say, I feel like Kojima's games, like at least in the later Metal Gear Solids, they let you like move the camera angle or even switch camera angle. I love doing that in cutscenes because I just love seeing like, oh, did they think of this detail? Oh my gosh, they did.
Yeah, they don't let you do any of that stuff, unfortunately, but they do let you. There is a lot of haptic stuff going on, which is quite well done as well. And I just think it's like compelling. Like the dialogue's interesting. Like there's a weird like sort of like, I don't know, American twang to a lot of these like Norse characters, but they're so like matter of fact about things. It's so funny. They're just like regular people. They're just gods as well, but like some of the back and forth and like the bitterness and pettiness, it's like all the like really good god stuff that you know that you love in the classics. Not the stuff where like gods are perfect, but like when they're just petty weirdos. Like you kind of get a bit of that in Hades as well, right? Where like you sort of just see how fallible they are. But in this, they're like, I feel like in Hades they're talking about all the silly things they did in their past, that they're sort of embarrassed about. Whereas in this, you're in the moment of them being petty and selfish and weird and trying to craft the world around them. So it's pretty neat. Yeah,
that's cool. I like that. Yeah. That's always been my favorite thing about like ancient mythology, is the kind of fallible nature of deities and stuff. Yeah. Like a lot of Abrahamic religions, the way they talk about God is kind of as this, you know, whether for good or bad, is just like this unquestionable force. And it's fun to talk about, like, oh yeah, Aphrodite, and then she like tripped and spilled her coffee. And you're like, it's just like me.
I think growing up Catholic as well, I think I always found it refreshing when I read about those sort of the ways in which, at least, like, who knows, I'm not a scholar of that stuff, so I don't know how it was written and then how much of that was sort of digested by the culture or created by the culture afterwards. You look at Dante's Inferno or stuff like that, where like obviously they're playing off of established stuff that was probably taken quite seriously when it was created by the mystics or oracles or whatever. But yeah, I always did. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Like, Christianity is very like matter of fact, or at least the way we interpret it these days is very matter of fact, when it seems like perhaps maybe a lot of this was meant to be more, in a way, like it's why I kind of prefer some of the Old Testament stuff, because it does show some of that fallibility and like God's sort of like meanness as well.
Yeah.
Not the sort of everything's rosy and flower versions of the New Testament. I think a lot of that isn't as well, but especially around the Christ stuff, it tends to be quite I don't know, pleasing on the ear.
I'm trying to remember which story it is, but there's a piece of Greek mythology where one of the gods comes undercover to talk to this king, and he has like the god has in his human incarnation has this long beautiful hair, and the king keeps calling him like a sissy boy, and it's so funny because it's kind of the dramatic irony of him being like undercover as a deity and he's just taking it on the chin because he's such a high status character, but the dramatic irony of it is in the situation he's obviously below the king, and it's just this like, yep, all right, that's me, like a long hair loser, like hippie. But I like stuff like that where it's like there are human elements to these characters because they take human incarnations or whatever, or if they don't take human incarnation, they can appear before people. But then there's like there's sort of like the undercover, like I know that I'm a god, but you don't know I'm a god, and it's like, yeah, it's fun. I don't know. Also,
Yeah.
what do you think? Like, if you had a time machine, you could go back and hang out with like Plato and show him. You know, I mean, I guess this is Norse god, so this is a bad example. You go hang out with a Viking and get them to play God of War Ragnarok. I wonder how they would feel about it, because they're like, "Oh, you're still worshiping Odin?" It's like, "Oh no, we don't respect him, but we do. You know, he's still around." But
Yeah, I love the that whole thing you're talking about of the you know, the humanizing of gods in those stories. What I think is interesting about this whole series is it really is like dragging Kratos back to humanity in a way that is like unsettling to him, that like his main motivation now is not justice or, you know, any of these grand illusions he had before. It's making sure that his son is okay, and like the conflict that comes into that, like of him trying to pragmatically, you know, keep his son safe, while maybe he kind of knows that the only reason, you know, the reason he's doing that is because of his motivations to make sure his son is okay, not because of any sort of like grander idea or like, you know, correct pragmatism or something. So it's cool. I'm excited to see where the story goes. And yeah, it just feels like they really, you know, they swung twice, and well, it's a bad metaphor, I guess, because the other game is really beloved, but it feels like an improved, tighter version, at least in my mind. So I don't know if it's gonna like convert people that didn't like that first game, but for me, for sure, where I was kind of like, I enjoyed it, but it wasn't like in my game of the year runnings or anything. This is more. It's doing a lot more for me with many of the same ingredients. So it seems like, I bet fans of the series will probably eat it up. Absolutely love it. That's God of War Ragnarok, not to be confused with other Ragnarok intellectual properties released in the past 12 months or so. Let's talk about Zaum.
Cool.
What's going on in the world of Estonian litigation?
Well, let me tell you. So Alexander Rostov, the art lead on Disco Elysium, and Robert Kurvitz, the sort of lead creative behind Disco Elysium, basically for people who aren't caught up, several of the main creatives at Zaum were forced out by management. It's kind of murky what happened, and they did not issue a statement, presumably because, you know, I mean, Zaum issued a statement, but it was kind of like murky PR speak where they're like, we're committed to a product that ensures that the consumer is, you know, but the people who were ousted didn't issue a statement. And most people kind of assumed that it was because they were in the process of pursuing legal action, or because they were kind of like, you know, fallen back to figure out what their options were, et cetera, et cetera. So there was a statement posted by Robert Kurvitz and Alexander Rostov today.
Wow, today's the day to do statements.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of business happening on a Wednesday. And I won't read the whole thing, mostly because there's a lot of umlauts and I don't want to embarrass myself. But the gist of it is essentially that. So if you listen to our Disco Elysium Zaum catch-up podcast about this whole thing, two of the original investors who were shareholders in Zaum were two Estonian businessmen who had a history involving fraud, essentially, way back in the late 2000s. And it appears that dark history has reared its ugly head. Essentially, Kurvitz and Rostov are alleging that those two essentially used money that belonged to Zaum to stage a hostile takeover of Zaum. Essentially, they bought a majority shareholder position using money that belonged to all of the shareholders.
Right.
So it's a fraudulent majority shareholder status that allowed them to force these people out. So one of the people who was supportive of them in doing this was Kaur Kender. I don't know how to say his name. Who was he's an Estonian author. He was kind of helped them shape the vision for Disco Elysium, and I believe was an early investor in this and stuff. But they allege that he sort of was part of facilitating this fraudulent takeover. And if I recall correctly, I think I read last night as I was going to bed that Kaur Kender might have left the company recently. There was something that Martin Luiga posted, the guy who did the last Zaum statement, original member of Zaum. And so basically it seems that they might have a good case to be made that that they were forced out under fraudulent circumstances because the people who were running the company, committed fraud to get control.
Okay, I didn't. Yeah, I don't know the details of that sort of stuff, and maybe they're sparing on it as well. Did they say how that other guy helped? Was he did he sell his shares or something to help facilitate it, or?
I have the only sentence that mentions him is, "We believe that these actions, which in our view and the view of our lawyers amount to criminal wrongdoing punishable by up to 3 years imprisonment, were perpetrated by," apologies in advance for pronunciation, Ilmar Kompas and Tunis Havel, who are the two Estonian businessmen, with support from Kaur Kender, another minority shareholder. And then it says, "This is hardly surprising given that Tunis Havel, who we believe to be the ringleader, has been convicted for defrauding investors on a different matter in 2007. And then there's a link to a article in Estonian.
Okay, so they are pursuing legal action against them?
Yeah,
Okay,
it seems like that is the case. Also, I think that they were withholding a statement like this until they basically had their offensive plan for legal action in place or whatever.
For
so
sure.
It seems like they're pulling the trigger.
Yeah, which is sort of the opposite of what's going on with the Mick Gordon stuff, which I guess we'll get into in a second. Do you have any other final thoughts on it? I guess we'll just kind of wait and see, but it looks like they're probably going to try and engage in some sort of legal action.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like, obviously, I know very little about patent law and even less about Estonian patent law, but I would say that just on the face of it, as a layman, it seems to me like they have a pretty good case to be made that if they were forced out by people who were not, who used illegal means to become the power holders in this company, yeah, I mean, if it's that serious that it's punishable by jail time or whatever, I could see a situation in which control reverts to the previous, the distribution of the shareholders before. Basically, what happened, to give one more piece of detail, is that the original investor was someone that they trusted, someone who they trusted to be equitable, the original majority shareholder. And then when power shifted from that person to these two Estonian businessmen who I mentioned with the fraud thing, that's when things got fucked up. So there's a world in which power reverts to that previous majority shareholder who is someone that they trusted, who was not involved in this at all. But
did he sell his shares?
It seems like. Yeah, it seems like it. So I don't know how it'll. It's anyone's guess basically.
This is a private case. It's not. This isn't a civil suit that's being brought towards. So it's not like it's not like the state is bringing action towards them, right? Also, this is cross-border, so it's probably messy as well in that respect.
Yeah, there is a mention that there's a mention of the UK law and Estonian law being involved. So it seems like it could be messy.
Are they talking about reverting back? Because I imagine I'm not a lawyer, but I imagine how something like this gets settled is more I don't know. Either they get the damages, obviously, is one part of it, like the loss of whatever ownership or revenues or anything like that. I don't know how you. I guess maybe getting control of the company. I can see how that could be like a tricky end result of something like this.
Yeah. I honestly don't know.
And they're not outlaying that in their statement, of course.
No. Yeah, they basically are just making the accusation and explaining how it came to pass, and saying they're taking legal action.
Cool.
So how it shakes out is anyone's guess, but it is better than allowing people who did a kind of fraudulent, hostile takeover of this company. Allegedly, yeah. We don't want to get sued in Estonia. To continue to hold this IP or this company. So yeah, and ultimately, I think, I'm hopeful that it is an avenue in which power could change hands, because I know that there are still a lot of very talented people working at Sound, people who worked very hard on Disco Elysium, and presumably new people who are working very hard on whatever the follow-up project is. And I imagine that is a shitty situation to be, you don't want to walk away from a good job, but also you don't want to work for people who did kind of a nasty, hostile takeover and forced out a lot of talented, creative people. So
allegedly.
Yeah. Allegedly.
Yeah, it just sucks, doesn't it? Hopefully, best of luck to them, and hopefully they can get their IP back or get their company back or do whatever it needs doing. I'm sure it'll be a difficult road. Hopefully it is as swift as possible. Always sad to see these types of things happening. Frustrating, especially in that case. There's a similar story, sort of, I wouldn't say unveiling. It's kind of like reared its ugly head again with relation to Mick Gordon and id Software. Mick being the composer behind the fantastic and much celebrated soundtrack to the original Doom 2016. We interviewed him and the person he is sort of putting the blame on, Marty Stratton, for our documentary back in 2016. Obviously they both worked on the sequel, Doom Eternal, and this is mostly surrounding that. Mick has produced a 58-minute long Medium post, which we will link, or if you just Google it, you'll find it pretty quick. It's at the top of our games at the moment. It's kind of what everyone's talking about, where he lays out in detail his version of events for what happened via the production of during the production of Doom Eternal's soundtrack for both the game and the sort of commercially released, soundtrack on a disc vinyl version that came out later. This is mostly in response to a Reddit post that Marty Stratton did a number of years ago now, May 5th, 2020, where he sort of talked about what had happened and alleged wrongdoing on the part of Mick Gordon, uncooperativeness and such in response to the sort of wider fracas that was going on with that OST. There is too much detail here to go into it. I'm again not a lawyer. We're not going to piece it apart piece by piece. I'm sure some people will. It's already kicking up a lot of sort of ire online. It is the epitome of a he said, she said situation, where it's also very difficult to parse the reality from the 2 points of view. We've had lots of discussions this morning in the Noclip Discord all about it, sort of talking about how unfortunate it is, and who's to blame, and the ways in which both parties could probably have done a better job, or like just weird stuff that's in there about like how these contracts were clearly not laid out properly, and like even the payment that was being done seemed crazy to me. That he was engaged in a per minute contract for work, considering his name and association with that first OST. I thought he could have asked for the sun, the moon, and the stars to make a sequel, and perhaps didn't. The lack of due diligence on everyone's part when it came to contracts and timing. He was getting paid late. All this sort of like, it just seemed like a nightmare. Like just and also communication errors laid on top of that sort of ended up in the in a real sort of bitter divorce. The whole thing is that serves nobody. I think this looks bad for everyone. I think Mick is publishing this for two reasons. One, I think he feels like he's owed money for a bunch of music that they used that was like unfinished, unmastered clips that were ended up sort of being chucked into the game. And considering he was paid per minute, he never got that the money for that. And also, in a more general sense, to sort of clear his name in the court of public opinion, I think, with relation to that post 2 years ago. My feeling is that this doesn't make anyone look good to two different audiences. I think this makes it look bad. It makes Marty look bad. In a weird way, it makes Bethesda maybe look good, because they sort of, in Mick's story here, they sort of stepped in and helped some stuff out. I think for Mick, it makes him look bad when it comes to like other work. I think it just, the sort of hot mess nature of this situation, and then one side saying that he was uncooperative. I think this doesn't look great if you're trying to work with big companies as well. the one thing, and I'm not, so that's not criticism what he's doing. He's doing it for reasons that he feels are important to him, and ultimately he works in the industry, and what the fuck do I know? But I just think from an outsider looking in, I think kicking this back up again sort of looks, doesn't seem great. And then my last thought on it is there's a really interesting part of the story that's about a payoff for him to basically get like a 6-figure sum that he turned down on the proviso that he wouldn't talk about this anymore. And I think that to me is like the place where maybe the most miscommunication or like the opportunity that was lost here, where like if Mick feels like he's been treated badly, that his name was besmirched, and that he didn't get paid, there was probably an opportunity there for him to get paid, and also for them to release some sort of joint statement and like just have the whole thing put to bed. Like make it so that nobody comes out of it looking dirty, as much as you possibly can, that it was amicable, that it was a misunderstanding, that, everyone was crunching and we all fucked up and blah, 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 or I fucked up in this way, or, but hey, it's whatever. And that everyone walks away good. And I'm like mournful for the world where that happened, because I think, the situation they're in now just sort of looks dumb and bad, and it makes everyone feel bad. It just sucks. I feel for Mick a lot. His work is incredible. He's incredibly talented. We know he's incredibly passionate. He's done plenty of interviews and streams over the years. He was very giving in our interview. It sucks that this happened, and I hope he gets plenty of work after this, and I hope this all works out for him on the financial side as well, because he's very talented and he deserves to be paid for the incredible work that he's done. But I would say if you work in a freelance world, read this. Caveat emptor. It is, you have lawyers, have agents. If you're doing something for a lot of money, just do your due diligence and don't get caught. Even if everyone's doing it for the right reasons and it's the second time around, nightmares can happen, and this clearly was one for them. Frank, I know you gave it a read as well. What did you sort of make of it when you're picking your way through it? It is long, but it's good. It's very well put together.
It's a bummer. Like, one reason I love Doom. I love Doom Eternal. It's so weird, like looking under the hood and seeing this. The one thing I loved, I adored. It's a weird phrase to say, but like one of the immediate things Mick outlines is he got locked into this contract where he had to give deliverables. Was it like like basically milestones. A music track milestones. I think it was like every 2 weeks or every 2 months. I forget the exact thing. Like, here's a finished track, years ahead of having any real gameplay to score to. So he's immediately screwed, and he wanted to highlight and bring it up, being like, "Hey, this is not going to work for me." And they dismissed his cries for help. And there was a sentence in that where they said, let me see. He realized the outline wouldn't work out, and the sentence was, "It was a masterpiece in Excel, but a disaster in reality."
Right.
And that hit me so hard, because I'm someone who's we had Drew Scanlon on like a few weeks ago, and I feel like he has a similar brain where he loves outlining stuff in Excel thing. I'm the same way. I have an app I use to make schedules, and I get very ambitious, but the reality never matches up. And then I get in this mental health anguish where it's like, I feel like I'm letting myself down by hitting these unrealistic expectations. So seeing that outline somewhere else, but in a magnitude way worse and critical, it's like, oh, I feel so bad. But, yeah, and then it just goes and goes and goes. The other big shocker is down the line, after already having this nightmare experience for him and being kind of like iced out of any communications with the sound teams, at an E3 they announced, there's going to be a Mick Gordon OST released in the collector's edition, and it was the first time he had heard of it is when it was announced on stage at E3. And he was saying, "Hey, my contract didn't say anything about this, and this is coming out in a few months." And it's like, oh my, and then it just gets worse and worse as you read it, and it's a very icky thing. And even I'm hesitant to just dive in, because it's like I don't want to be ignorant. Like, it's not even my story, but it's just reading that, it's like, oh man, like, I just want everything to work out for everybody. Yeah,
the fact that the original Reddit post also was a bit weird. And I think if you go back and read it, and I think Marty is not particularly. He's not it's not overly abrasive. Maybe actually if you read this one first and then go back and read Marty's, maybe it sort of is a weird order of doing it, but it doesn't. It sort of maybe makes that one feel a little bit easier going. But obviously it was the first big assault in this sort of salvo war, in this war of words. But if everyone is alleging communication problems, and then you look at the two parties involved, and one of them has this massive Reddit post and the other one has a massive Medium post, then yeah, it looks like maybe you guys have communication problems. Like, it looks like maybe there wasn't, you guys did not, like somebody needed to be in the middle, or I don't know what, like whatever communication styles everyone has clearly didn't match up. But what's weird to me is that like they did the first game, right? So they had a workflow presumably that they did stick to or didn't stick to. I think having milestones for, like, it very much sounded like they hired him as a contractor to work on this project with this team. Whereas like if I were him in that scenario, and hindsight is obviously 2020, but the contract shouldn't have milestones. It shouldn't have like those types of requirements. And it shouldn't be per minute. You shouldn't be like, absolutely not per minute. It's for music. I like, people do per minute contracts for video work, and I thought they're insane, because you can do a per minute of a video that requires basically no revisions, or you can have per minute of a video that needs 100 revisions, and those are orders of magnitude different projects, and you're paying the same amount. It seems absolutely ludicrous to do per minute, like, especially when like nobody in their right mind wanted to play Doom Eternal without Mick Gordon's music. Like, he was in such a powerful negotiating position. So when I heard that like they were marrying him to this like 2-week, it made me think like, was the game going to be bigger, and the soundtrack on 2016 came in super late, and they were like trying to create a structure to make sure that wouldn't happen? Were the people on the audio side on id being too precious about when they got music in, and Mick being too precious about how it matched to the game, and they ultimately didn't care? They just wanted songs that they said would go in any level. There's so much like creative detail that like you need to go through like weeks of therapy or divorce proceedings to figure out actually where did everything go wrong. But the idea that there was miscommunication seems very clear. It has been demonstrated by what's happened subsequently, and I just, for both of their sake, I think you can win the court of public opinion. Like, Reddit can think you're right and your career's over. You know what I mean? Or Reddit can think you're wrong and you'll still make a multi-million-dollar game that'll sell a lot of money. Like, I hope everything works out for Mick, because this is kind of a risky play in some ways. I'm not sure if it's that, I don't know. I'm not in his position though, so I can't say.
It's tough to communicate the nature of creative work to people who don't do creative work, because it's so nonlinear. That's what I was thinking when you were saying the per minute thing.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things, I feel like one of the reasons that our dynamic in Noclip works so well is because everyone in Noclip makes stuff. And so there's no person who's just, sitting at a desk and being like, okay, so you should be able to, this is about like a 4-day edit, right? And then if I hit up that person and say, hey, like, I need an extra day, this middle chapter or whatever, it just wasn't flowing. And, it's like, do you want this to be a really good documentary, or do you want it to be done a day earlier? And I think I think that can come off as like abdicating your duty if you don't understand the kind of non-linear flow of doing creative work. And I think anyone who has tried to make something creative understands that it's oftentimes it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Sometimes it's 1 step forward and 2 steps back. And so, I wonder if, and also, I think a lot of the most talented creative people I've ever met in my life were people who, maybe they don't. I'm not saying this applies to Mick. I'm just kind of like speaking generally about the nature of creative work. That sometimes those people do the best work when they're under the gun. Sometimes it takes a lot of just, like, every writer I've ever talked to has said that a huge amount of the work involved in writing is just sitting around and doing nothing, because it takes a long time to just process everything in your head. And music is so like ethereal and weird and nebulous that I really think just, coming up with the right aesthetic, coming up with good composition and stuff. I feel like a lot of that is just going and taking a shower for an hour and sitting on the bottom of the floor waiting. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yesterday I edited on the Crystal Dynamics doc. Yesterday I got like 40 minutes of like sharp, like end of the road editing done in one day. And I was like, what the fuck happened? And I was looking at it and I was like, oh, it's because like everything's here. And because I've been sitting with this everyone's collaborated and contributed to this thing, and I've been thinking about this edit for 4 months. That's why it came together, because like I know what it is now because I've been thinking about it, maybe 1% of my brain for 4 months. So the idea that like somebody who I can totally see, if I was like hire Mick Gordon tomorrow to make 100 music tracks in a year, I bet he could do it. If I was to ask him to make a music track every 3 days for a year, I'd bet he couldn't. Right? Yeah. Like, because it's too, like you said, like, it's very difficult to like schedule people that way. It's not linear, and it's not, like, what's the word? Like, it's not like the beat of a drum. It's not constant. It's an ebb and a flow. Creativity is like such an ebb and a flow. And you strike while the iron's hot when you feel it, when you're able to edit. You know, it's why like we don't have, you know, everyone here is is their own freelancer, and I'm like, this is what we need this month, and then you go do it, and if it's a week later, then it took an extra week, because it takes me an extra week to do stuff, you know, like it just does. Like you can't meter that stuff out. And also I think it's really hard for like somebody like Mick, right, where I don't think his industry pays very well, you know, music. I think it's music and artists are like so undervalued, for the craft that they do, that like I can see he has to be the creative, he needs to wear the business hat, he probably has to read the contracts, he probably has to keep the website up to date, do his own PR, you know what I mean, like all that sort of stuff. He's a one-man band, he's got a lot of things to worry about, and when he is doing the creative work, you want him worrying about the creative work. You don't want him worried about contracts or about how much money he's getting paid. Like if you're a multi-million-dollar company and you're hiring somebody like that, you throw money at them so that they're not thinking about it. It's not because you're trying to save money. It's that you want the product they're making to be the best version. So you want them not thinking about anything else except the best version of it. And if they're running into stumbling blocks and you are too, you know, it's like you hired them. They're like your children. You're minding them. You need to make sure that they're, you know, if you don't get the best out of them, that's on you, right? And it's on him, I think, to make sure that those rules are sort of rules that he's comfortable with are established at the start. It sounds like they weren't. Sounds like they didn't have contracts that made sense. They set up this milestone stuff, which clearly immediately looked like it didn't make any sense. It's regrettable that wasn't figured out earlier, I think, and it wasn't for whatever reason. And then nobody was there to put the fire out when this constant breakdown in communication was getting worse and worse and worse over months and years. Like somebody should have put their hands up and said, okay, we need to get in a meeting and fix this. And nobody at id or Bethesda apparently did. Or at least it sounds like Bethesda did once Bethesda found out about it. So, you know. And I'm sure Marty and the rest of those guys were really fucking busy with 20 other problems and didn't think this was a big problem. And you know what I mean? It's just, you can tell. You can tell how this happened. It's like so obvious. And we've all been there and seen it happen in a company or corporation, you know, somebody gets the loose end and just happen. Entropy makes it go that way, you know, it fucking sucks. So that's it. So same with Zaum. It's like, just hope it works out. I hate seeing my parents fight. You know what I mean? It's a bummer, man. It's such a bummer. Because you're like, I want Mick Gordon to do, I don't know what they're doing next. I'm sure it's going to be a rad first-person shooter. I hope it's like a Quake thing or something. But like, just knowing that he's not going to be involved in that, you know, he probably could have made some rad music for whatever they're doing next.
Yeah,
Hexen.
totally.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's just, yeah, that's
Commander
that's
Keen.
It's oh my god, Commander Keen with a Mick Gordon soundtrack. It's kind of just a loss for people who love Doom and like Bethesda id games, whatever. It's just, you know, I mean, in an ideal world, there would be infinite money for talented people to make the things that they want to make as long as it takes to make them the best. But we don't live in that world, and so sometimes the shit gets all fucked. The shit gets all fucked. It sure does. Well said. Sorry, Frank, go ahead.
I did want to like uplift it so the podcast ends with a more positive note about music. One thing about Sonic Frontiers, when you're in the dreary, melancholy like island, the music is like Breath of the Wild ambient, like dun 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 dun. And then when you're in cyberspace, it is the best. It is amazing. The soundtrack is awesome. When you turn into Supersonic, a song starts playing and it sounds like Slipknot. Seriously. Seriously.
Did Mick Gordon do it?
Sonic Frontiers music is great when you're in cyberspace. I also took a screenshot. I have to read this sentence out loud. So I got to the second island in Sonic Frontiers, and you find Knuckles entrapped in cyberspace, and the prompt that pops up: Knuckles memory token. Knuckles is in an unstable state, trapped in cyberspace. So
oh my god,
that's
Me
just
too,
a real
brother.
sentence.
Me too.
Yeah,
wow.
An unstable state trapped in cyberspace.
Aren't we all?
Yeah,
and
you're
that just-
right. God.
I
feels
feel
like yeah.
That's when Adam Curtis starts talking. He's like, "But what Sonic didn't know is that we were all trapped inside of an unstable state within cyberspace."
Oh my god, I have to go back and finish that. I haven't finished that, and I haven't finished Signalis.
Yeah.
I've just totally.
Nice.
I gotta carry that stuff up.
I will say it is we are now officially I'm calling it Summer Games is going forever. We're now in Gamer Christmas.
Okay.
Oh, nice.
There's so much coming out. Halo co-op is finally out.
Right.
Finally co-op it. Call of Duty is the best. It's so good. They announced new Warzone stuff. They're adding a third-person mode to Warzone, so they're going full Fortnite with it. God of War, Sonic Frontiers, Signalis. Seriously, like, we're in heaven for games, so I'm excited to play stuff.
We're in heaven for games. Heaven is a game pipe. Haven't thought about
Heaven's
that.
a console on Earth.
There you go.
RPC.
Exactly. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Oh man. Okay, that's a podcast. Podcast at noclip.video. Get your games in. Put them in. Do you want Sonic Frontiers in there? Do you want Doom Eternal in there? Do you want Disco Elysium in there? If you don't do it, nobody else will. Probably, right? There'll be some games you like in there, but not the ones you'll be listening to podcasts and going like, I really wish they did that one.
It's kind of a really good opportunity to get like capsule reviews of a game. Like what you get to hear our crew's thoughts on literally any game. Throw in some arcade games. Throw in some weird Jeff Gerstmann type like I don't know, random.
Yeah, we'll have the list beforehand, so we'll do a little
Yeah.
bit of like looking around. We'll highlight it that the crew will be looking at it. So, and this is all sort of like prep work for our ultimate Game of the Year podcast, which we will be doing later in the year. A couple of bits of housekeeping. Stunt Derby episode 2 is now live. A video all about how to optimize your game for sales and wish lists on Steam. We have talked to some interesting folks, Chris Zukowski and our good friend Derek Liu, trailer creator extraordinaire, all about the tricks of the trade when it comes to selling your game on Steam. So go check that out in our latest episode of Stunt Derby series over on Noclip Crew. We also have dates for some of our things. The Crystal Dynamics documentary, 2 hours long. It's going up the weekend of Thanksgiving. We also have the Hyperlight Development video going live on Christmas, and I've basically started talking about it now, so I'll start talking about it now. We are going to be filming the launch of Dwarf Fortress with Tarn and Zach Adams up in Washington State in early December when the Steam version of Dwarf Fortress hits those digital shelves. So that'll be one project we're working on, and a couple of other secret ones as well in the making as we look towards 2023. Oh, and finally, we have documentaries, or rather episodes of Noclip Greatest Hits on Unreal Tournament / Unreal and the Wipeout franchise that were voted for by our patrons. So massive thanks to them for that. And for those of you who are waiting for the Legacy of Kain episode, we obviously haven't got enough people for it yet, but there will be a nice chunky 20 minute long, I think, segment of the Crystal Dynamics doc all about the Legacy of Kain franchise. And we got some really good stuff in there. So be sure to check that out. That's a podcast. Jeremy, what you doing for the rest of your week?
You guys ever feel like when there's the 3 vertical screens of us on the recording that it's like a character select screen? And
I have them horizontal.
Okay, mine are vertical. I feel like we're a character select screen. What was the question? What am I doing this week?
Yeah, what are you doing this week?
I got my booster yesterday. Went to Booster's Tower, Super Mario RPG reference, and I am extremely tired. I'll probably just play some games. The next Jane Dev is heavy in the works. I think it's gonna be a good one. I wrote a script. It's gonna be a little more video essay-ish, I think.
Nice.
I have a script that I think is really, really good, so I'm probably gonna crush between 1 and 4 beers and do some camera antics.
It better be good. I need 5 minutes of that by the end of the week, or you're not getting your milestone payments, all right?
No. Hey man, we're gonna go into heavy negotiations. This is gonna get real ugly, all right?
Frank, what are you doing for the rest of your week? Congratulations! I know your film thing you were doing just wrapped up.
my student film program, Real Voices, wrapped. The students were extremely proud of their work, which some years they aren't. And I mean, like, not a knock, but so what happens sometimes with student films is like if the kids aren't stoked on the projects, they don't invite anyone. They don't tell anyone about the screening.
Right.
Every student invited like max, like everyone they knew. So we had a like packed screening. The Instagram was blowing up with people stoked. So it's like, oh, it like kind of refilled my faith. I was like, oh, this is cool. Okay, yeah. But I do need to decompress from like the festival crunch. I had one night where I only slept 4 hours, but that's also because I'm playing Call of Duty every night. So
there you go.
It's legitimately great. Anime Expo Chibi. Anime Expo is the biggest anime convention. It happens every summer in LA. They're doing a micro anime expo.
Chibi, I got it.
It'll be this Saturday and Sunday. So I'm gonna check that out. I love going to anime conventions. The smaller, the weirder, the better. I'm bringing my camera. I'm sure I'll film a music video or something. So I love going to anime conventions. It's like it's nerd Halloween. Everyone's dressing up. You find cool art. I really adore it. And then I need to catch up on comic books. I actually, because of Gotham Knights, I started reading Batman New 52, which is like the Court of Owls saga, and it's like amazing.
Awesome.
It's illustrated by Greg Capullo, who also did original Spawn, so it's like, okay.
Nice. Right down your wheelhouse then.
Yeah, and then so so I feel like now I get to indulge and catch up on Frank's stuff after
it sounds like
working for it. Yeah, so I'm excited.
A Frank weekend for Frank. I like it.
Yeah.
I'm going to be doing Extra Life on Friday, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Play some more of this here Ragnarok game. Next week's episode is going to be Patreon only, so if you want to support our show and get access to this ad-free podcast, it's funny, sometimes I'm on the internet and people are complaining about their podcast having too many ads, and I'm like, what? What? Ads? Nah. Ads suck. Why would you put ads on something? We don't do ads on this podcast, but we're all only here because of our amazing patrons. So if you'd like to support our work and get access to loads of bonus stuff, including early access to that Crystal Dynamics doc, we'll probably have a bunch of extra long form interviews from that one as well, maybe the Legacy of Kain ones. You can do so over at patreon.com/Noclip, and you'll also get access to 6.5 years of goodies, which is always fun to watch because you can see my weight get higher and lower over the years and figure out where we are based on that. That's a podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you all next time. Bye.